I've been working for about 6 years in this general area around data sharing for academic research. A lot of my life has been taken up by this, as I've gone from Miss to Mrs, then finally, at the end of last year, Doctor. So I look forward to sharing with you this journey that I've been on. So firstly, I must say that I have no conflicts of interest. I'm a member of various working groups that are researching this area, and my views are my own, not necessarily reflecting my employers or my funders. So I mentioned academic research in my title, and specifically what I'm interested in is a technique called evidence synthesis. And really what I mean here is anything that combines sources of numerical data. So meta-analysis, where two drugs can be compared over multiple trials, and also network meta-analysis. This is slightly different, where more than two things can be combined, 3 drugs, 4 drugs or more across multiple trials in a network. And these sorts of analyses have traditionally been performed using summary level data or aggregate data, such as summary statistics extracted from published literature, journal articles, and also more recently, as mentioned in the session this morning, clinical study reports can also be used for this purpose. An alternative approach to this is using the IPD instead of the aggregate data. And in this sort of approach, the data sets are requested and completely reanalyzed. And there are so many advantages to this approach, more than I can describe here today. Essentially, they allow us as researchers the flexibility and the freedom to do what we want to do with the data, rather than relying on what is being published in journal articles. So this approach here is widely regarded to be the gold standard approach to meta-analysis. So before I go to where we are now, we've heard from the other two speakers in the session where we are today with data sharing. I just want to go back in time slightly to thinking about the first IPD meta-analysis, which the very first one was published in 1987, which is also the year that I was born. So this technique is not new, it is as old as I am. So thinking about the early days, when I was not personally involved, but I've heard from colleagues who were, so talking about pre-2000, if you wanted data to put into a meta-analysis, you would have to maybe write a letter to people who are doing trials, pick up the phone and call them, maybe have a meeting to all discuss, let's all share our data in a project, how are we going to do that? And data was often provided on paper, the original files were handed over, maybe faxed over. And just in general, from what I've been told, it was all a very informal process. Everyone knew everybody else who was doing trials, and everyone was happy to share. I hear of some of these agreements being made on the golf course, for example. Whereas going forward in time, so now thinking post-2000, to where I was getting involved in this in around 2011, 2012, we did come forward at the times and reach the digital age. Now, data requesting was generally done by email, and it was also provided by email, sometimes by a CD, floppy disk in some of the earlier days. But then also more questions were beginning to be asked about what the data would be used for, maybe some concerns that data may not be used for the right reasons or the reasons people said they were going to use it for. And also more research groups would be popping up all over the world, so not necessarily everyone knew everybody else anymore. So this led to the first legal documents, data sharing agreements being signed in the sort of late 2000s to just to give a little bit of security around what exactly is being done with the data, and who owns data, who owns results, and so on, so everyone knows where they stand. So where we are today, I'm taking a screenshot of clinicalstudydatarequest.com, which may or may not imply that this is my researcher preferred platform, or the platforms do exist. I think everyone in the room knows that a lot of the information on this slide that we do have now, a lot of data transparency policies from some of the very big names out there. Everyone knows how these data sharing platforms work, hopefully now, after the previous two talks. But there is also, among the people who are actually doing trials, academic trials in particular, and also patients, there are surveys out there that show that clinical trial data sharing is widely supported across the entire research community. So the example that I'm going to talk about today, the work that I've been involved with, is work I've been doing on behalf of the Cochrane collaboration. and this is an individual participants data network meta-analysis of anti-epileptic drugs. And my research group has done previous work in this area. This was published in 2007. And for that work, the team requested data using some of the methods described on a previous slide. We do have some data that was recorded on paper for this work. So we were looking at randomised control trials that were comparing 2 or more of 8 different anti-epileptic drugs. And the team requested data from 30 trials over around about 10-year period here, and they got data for 19 out of those 30 trials, which equates to around 80% of the data from nearly 6,000 participants. And we also had 2 large trials in this area that were conducted at our site, so we didn't need to request those. So in total, around 6,500 patients worth of data was included in this original work in 2007. And this is a very fast-moving research area. More drugs were licensed fairly soon after this work was published. So plans to update this work with new evidence since 2007, and also with new drugs, started in 2010, which led to me being employed by the university in 2011 to lead on this work. So this is the network of drugs that I've been looking at. We have 10 different drugs here. I won't talk through in any level of detail on this network, because I have spoken about it previously, that essentially putting together these 10 drugs in this way allows us to make pairwise comparisons of any of them, regardless of whether we actually have trial data to compare those drugs or not. We can make what's called indirect comparisons. And for the update, obviously we already had around 6,000 patients worth of data. We found 45 new randomised control trials that contributed evidence here, with about 9,600 participants in them. And the IPD was requested for all of these trials by me between 2012 and 2016. Just to go back a step, why were we actually looking at IPD for this? Why weren't we extracting information from published journal articles on this? Essentially, it was because we had a fairly complex question. The primary outcome that we were looking at here, which is a very important outcome in epilepsy, is time to withdrawal of allocated treatment. And this is an important outcome because it's an outcome to which patients can contribute. They can help to decide with the clinical team if they want to carry on taking the drug. Maybe the drug isn't working for them, they're still having seizures, maybe they're having side effects, maybe there's other reasons why they don't want to keep taking the drug. So while it's a very good patient-centred outcome, this does make it a little difficult to be able to analyse. And specifically what we wanted to know within these reasons for withdrawing from treatment, we wanted to know whether the reason was treatment-related or not, as that directly affects our analysis. And particularly thinking about those other reasons as well, we often required quite detailed level text about exactly why people withdrew from treatment to be able to make that judgment and standardise this outcome about whether people were withdrawing for treatment-related reasons. We were also interested in examining the relationship between the treatment effects of different drugs and epilepsy type. As NICE, National Institute of Clinical Excellence in the UK, and I believe also other guideline setters at the time were making similar recommendations. NICE recommends different first-line drugs in single therapy, so the first drug that you would receive when you get an epilepsy diagnosis for people who have different seizure types. So for the majority seizure type focal seizures, you'd be recommended to start on CBZ, carbamazepine, or LTG lamotrigine. Whereas if you're experiencing generalised seizures, which is the minority seizure type, you would be recommended to start on VPS, sodium valproate. So the network meta-analysis incorporated what we call a treatment covariate interaction, which is a slightly statistical term, but essentially that just means that we can get separate results for these 2 different seizure types from the same network. So the actual data requesting, so I've split this into 2 separate time periods, thinking about these 45 new trials that we had identified from either journal articles or from published conference abstracts. Started in 2012. What did we do? So we sent an invite letter with a bit of information about the project, what we were doing, and also a data request form to the corresponding authors of all of the journal articles or abstracts that we found by email, and also if there was a postal address by actual physical mail. If we didn't get any response from the corresponding author, then we would look to trace any other author that was listed on the article and try and contact them. And we also made some of our personal contacts here from previous work if we thought they might be able to help us. We didn't set any specific deadlines for providing data, and we also were trying to help out people providing data as much as possible, that we would accept data in any format, whether that be paper, electronic, hopefully electronic, but any file form. We weren't specifying exactly what type of data that we would have. We found it difficult to make contact where trials were sponsored. So sometimes an author would reply to us saying, I don't have the data, the sponsor holds it, which may be a pharmaceutical sponsor, maybe a different sponsor. And this would often lead to a dead end for us, thinking about who actually owns this data, who are these sponsors, and how do we get hold of them. So overall progress was very slow. And by the end of 2013, we only had data from 2 publicly funded trials, so academic trials, which was a total of 3% of the data that we were requesting from those 45 trials. So overall, by the start of 2014, it wasn't looking good. But then, as if by magic, in January 2014, CSDR was launched, and I must obviously acknowledge that CSDR previously GSK shared. This was all going on in mid 2013. Just to split the years up, that's why I picked that date of January 2014. So we examined in a bit more detail how many trials we believe to be sponsored by industry, and other trials which appear to have either public, academic, or government funding. And for the 16 industry-sponsored trials, we made our requests again. 6 of these requests were made to CSDR, and 10 requests were made directly to the sponsor, as they weren't on CSDR or any other data sharing platforms at the time. But I do know that all of these sponsors now are on either CSDR or other data sharing platforms. It was just an ongoing process at the time we were making the requests. So we were very transparent in what we were doing. We had a published protocol of our work, and we used that to put together our research proposal that we submitted to CSDR, also the list of data that we required, our CVs and so on, to show that we were qualified people to do this. And then following all of this, by the end of 2016, we managed to get data for 15 out of 45 trials, a third, which doesn't sound like that much, but we did get data for the big trials. So we got in total just over 5,000 worth of data from 9,600 participants, 55%. And also just to note that we had 1 trial provided to us with 136 patients from CSDR in the remote SaaS-based platform. So coming back to the network, thinking about the data we already had from the previous work and this new data that we've got, we now had data for nearly 12,400 participants out of around 18,000, 69% of our total data, which looks so much better than that 3% that we had back at the end of 2013. And we had nearly half the trials worth of data, so 47% worth of the trials. So where we didn't get the data, thinking about the reasons quoted across the 2 different time periods, so the previous work done by my team and the work that I was involved in. In the early days, the main reasons that were given, if any reason was given at all, was that data had been lost, which was mainly a problem for academic trials. The information we wanted wasn't recorded in that trial, or we were unable to make contact with anybody to actually request the data. And then going forward to 2012 to 2016, we were again hearing the same reasons, data being lost in academic trials, which is maybe a little bit worrying in 2012 that people were losing their data. There's probably some work we could be doing there in academia, follow that one up at a separate time. We were also hearing some new reasons emerging for why data wasn't available. Country-specific restrictions over what could be anonymised and what could be provided. Some authors expressed ethical concerns about data sharing, that their ethics statements may not allow it, or they didn't agree with data sharing. And also we had several studies not unavailable to us because the costs of providing the data were prohibitive. And from a very simple comparison I did of looking at the different trial characteristics from the studies where we had IPD available compared to the ones where we didn't, a general observation is that the provision of IPD does seem to be related to the resources of the trial, which is quite intuitive, that the larger multi-centre pharmaceutical sponsored trials were providing more IPD than the smaller single-centre academic trials, possibly because they have more resources to actually provide that data. So, getting 12,000 patients worth of data from 36 trials into a format that we can actually analyse, this was definitely not a simple undertaking. These trials were published over a very long time period. They were in different formats. Some of them actually were even in different languages that we had to get translated, different methods of recording data, different quality of data provided. So we definitely needed to give some thought towards our standardised approach to making sure that the data that we had from all these different trials was being treated equally. So we started off by checking all of the data that we had according to any published reports of the data, so academic journal articles, clinicaltrials.gov if they were more recent trials, that everything matched up with the data that we had. And if there was any inconsistencies or we had any difficulties interpreting the data, then we would discuss that with whoever had provided the data to us, whether it be a pharmaceutical sponsor or an author of an academic trial. So once we'd established that there were no big problems with the data, we would go to calculate our outcomes. So I've mentioned our primary outcome. And we also had a couple of secondary outcomes. So we're looking at remission of seizures and also time to first seizure. I should just note that the first secondary outcome, this time to remission, those are quite difficult outcomes to actually calculate, as some patients may go into immediate remission after they start taking the drugs, others may have a few seizures, then some remission, then a few seizures, then some remission. So we'd have to look at the entire trial to figure out whether we ever had a 12-month or 6-month period of remission through it. So that certainly wasn't an easy undertaking. And there were actually 3 of us working on this. I worked on all data sets, and two of my statistical colleagues double-checked and duplicate prepared all of the data to make sure that it was definitely right. So we didn't really keep track of exactly how long it was taking us to do this. We didn't think it was a fair comparison. We weren't racing each other. And also we had trials that were in different formats, different states overall, so we didn't feel it was a fair comparison. And really, what we wanted was the data to be correct. It wasn't really of direct interest to see exactly how long it was taking to do. Just to make an observation, I don't have any data to back this up, but an observation, just considering I looked at all of the data sets, that the more recently provided data, particularly the industry-sponsored data, definitely required fewer initial checks, very few, if any, uncertainties about interpretation, hardly any inconsistencies with published reports. So I would interpret this to be a higher quality of this more recent data, which meant that from my point of view, the preparation was relatively quick, and there wasn't much need to communicate with the data providers. And I would say this is reflective of the extra attention that was being given to these data sets before sharing, so the anonymisation and so on, whereas some of the early data sets that we had were maybe sent to us after someone hadn't looked at it for 10 years and we were told, go and see if what you need is in there. So just to come back to, I mentioned previously we had one trial provided in CSDR. So as Ben mentioned, the process of data sharing agreement, data anonymised, provided to us in the remote SaaS platform. We also had 7 other industry-sponsored trials where IPD was provided to us directly. All of those, again, had data sharing agreements. And we had data from 7 publicly or academically funded trials where IPD was provided to us directly. So, I mean, sent by email, sent by CD. Some of those had data sharing agreements that were maybe slightly less formal than the ones that were provided by industry, and some didn't have any data sharing agreements at all. At the time, we were not able to download the data that we had in the remote SaaS platform, and some of the data sharing agreements that we had prevented us from uploading the data that we had stored ourselves onto the remote platform, as we'd specified within these data sharing agreements that we would create a secure location for that data and it wouldn't move from there. So we created a network drive at the university local and had restricted access to only the trial team to access it, to provide that extra level of security for the data sharing agreements. And we couldn't upload it to the platforms where we didn't have control over what would be done with the data and who was accessing it. So it was actually impossible to get all of our data together in one place to combine for our mesh analysis. And unfortunately, despite all the efforts put in to prepare that data for us and share it with us, we actually had to exclude that data from our main analysis. But we did include it in some sort of secondary analyses, treating it as summary data. There'll be a reference later if you want to have a look at exactly how we did that. So, one trial, 136 patients excluded. That's only actually about 1%, slightly less than 1% of our overall data. It probably hasn't influenced our overall results and conclusions. But thinking forward to today, we had those other 7 industry-sponsored trials where IPD was provided directly. They weren't on CSDR or any other data sharing platforms at the time of the request. But thinking today about where these sponsors are, 4 of them are now on CSDR, so I'm assuming they would have provided us with the data via CSDR. 2 would have provided via the Yoda project, and 1, when I wrote these slides, was on a single sponsor platform, and I now see is on Vivly. So perhaps their own platform, perhaps on Vivly. Regardless of exactly where they are, those are separate places. And if we were unable to get all of the data together, potentially we might have had to exclude an absolute maximum of all of these trials, 4,500 participants, which would be 37% of the total data provided, which is much larger than that 1% if we can't get the data together to put it all into analysis, or we have to selectively choose which of those trials that we're going to include, which is our favourite platform to try and actually analyse the data in. So just to very briefly summarise the actual results of this work, please do check the references if you're interested when the slides are available. So the conclusions of this work are that the current NICE guidelines are supported, both for focal seizures and generalised onset seizures. And for focal seizures, a newer drug, levetiracetam, also known as Keppra, may be a good alternative. And importantly, as recent work has shown, the recommended treatment for generalised seizures, sodium valproate, to be associated with birth defects, both physical and neurodevelopmental, so it's no longer recommended for children, women of childbearing potential. That LTG, lamotrigine and levetiracetam may be good alternatives for those who cannot take valproate. And the NICE guidelines in the UK are currently being updated, and this work has been requested to contribute to that update. So there's some immediate impact of this work and what it's being used for. So some reflections of all this work and of the last 6 years. So recent years have seen huge changes in both the attitudes towards data sharing, positive changes that we now, it seems to be widely accepted this is definitely a thing that we should be doing, and also the methods in which data is being shared with people like me who are doing this work is also changing. And these changes obviously have huge implications for the kind of work that we can do. It brings many advantages and also some challenges across academic research, and specifically in my context, evidence synthesis. So this work in epilepsy would absolutely not have been possible without access to the IPD from those 12,391 participants and everyone over the many years who has shared data with our team. And I do personally believe that it's unlikely that so much data would have been provided to us recently if it hadn't been for the recent data sharing initiatives put forward by GSK in 2013, and then with so many other sponsors as well going towards this era of data transparency in 2014. However, some challenges do remain, particularly relating to these multi-sponsor requests where there are potentially lots of different platforms that may be getting involved, and if data is restricted access on these platforms, can data ever be all put together to be analysed within the same project? And thank you. I'll take the questions when we have the panel. Thank you.